Paris, 1901. In the early 20th century, the city becomes a magnet for artists and collectors from around the world, drawn to its cultural effervescence. For several years now, an artistic event has been occurring in response to the official salons, gathering the most innovative artists of the time, known as the Salon des Indépendants. This year, for the first time, the name of an artist appears on the list of exhibitors, that of Marval. More than just a mention, it signifies a birthright for the bearer. At this very moment in 1901, Paris, age 35, the artist Jacqueline Marval is born. At nearly 20 years old, when she was still Marie-Joséphine Vallée and lived in her native region near Grenoble, she started her career as a school teacher, like her parents, then married and had a child. However, 6 months later, her child dies. Following a severe depression, she leaves her husband, moves to the city, works not as a teacher, but as an embroiderer and waistcoat maker, and meets the painters of her generation. Among them is Jules Flandrin, with whom she would move upon arriving in Paris. Years later, she reflected on her choices.
My departure for Paris was decided by me when, harassed by a stupid husband, I could no longer hope to live in Grenoble. I had to earn my life, there as elsewhere, and try to realize my dreams.
Accompanying this change of destiny, she adopts the first 3 letters of her first and last name to call herself Marval. Not only does she change her name, but her appearance itself marks her desire for freedom. Gabriel Fournier, a painter and a friend, portrays her a few years later on the terrace of a Parisian café.
Dressed by Paquin and then by Poiret, wearing a huge hat pressed onto her red hair when it's not green, she appears truly eccentric.
But what will mark the ambition of this transition from one identity to another is first and foremost the place her art will take to become her life purpose. In 1901, when she exhibits for the first time at the Salon des Indépendants, Jacqueline Marval presents a selection of 10 paintings. 9 are purchased by the famous dealer Ambroise Vollard. In the list, the first 3 paintings are titled after 3 female figures. The Odalisque, first title of the Odalisque with a cheetah, Minerva, goddess of arts and sciences, and finally the Siren. To understand the true scope of these paintings at the dawn of Marval's career, we must look back a little earlier in the artist's production and the context in which they were created. Since her move to Rue Campagne Première in a building filled with artist studios, Marval shares her life with the painter Jules Flandrin. Their life together gives her access to a studio and a network. Him being a student at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, in Gustave Moreau's studio. Like many who would be called the Fauves, starting with Matisse. One might think that the conditions for each to envision an artistic career were met. However, a woman's presence in his studio made her an ideal model for the young painter. Thus, he represents her, either herself in a daily scene or in genre scenes, antique or religious. Marval does not content herself with this muse's role. On the contrary, she first focuses on her own image. From the beginning, her self-portrait carves out a prominent place among her favorite subjects, effectively announcing, as when she changed her name, her intention to reinvent her image. Minerva, the Siren, and the Odalisque with a cheetah are among her first exhibited paintings. In each, the artist's physique is recognizable. Through her presence in her paintings, by literally taking over the model's place, Marval breaks the link that united these female figures to an imagery almost exclusively produced and maintained by men, especially in nude painting. She forges a link that unites these figures to herself, making them a major subject of her paintings. With the Odalisque with a cheetah, where she depicts a reclining female nude whose right hand caresses a cheetah's neck while her face looks into the distance, she alters the traditional power dynamic maintained with the model, who is usually passively observed. It could be considered the first female nude self-portrait, where such a nude done by a woman already constitutes an avant-garde approach. The cultural context of 1903 is not so different from 1901, and the significance of another painting by Marval is no less important. At the opening of the Salon des Indépendants of 1903, the Parisian public first discovers her masterpiece, the Odalisque. The poet and critic Guillaume Apollinaire once wrote,
"In her large canvas of the Odalisque, Mrs. Marval has created an important work for modern painting."
In 1903, at this new edition of the Salon des Indépendants, among her 8 exhibited paintings, Jacqueline Marval presents the Odalisques, a painting notable for its ambition in size and for the presence of nudes as confidently portrayed by a female artist of this generation. 5 female figures define the boundary of a space around which the framing is concentrated. The chosen viewpoint places us face to face with the models. The 2 figures on the right, by returning our gaze, confirm that we are in the position of the observed voyeur. While one engages us with a frontal look, the other turns towards us, which moves her face away from the internal lighting of the scene and confirms that the painting sees us. She breaks the cohesion of the rest of the group, which directs all its attention towards her, as she turns away while a cup is offered to her. The background contributes to the narrative of this story. The left part of the image is entirely occupied by a curtain dividing the composition in 2 parts and delimits a first space on the left, with characters still concerned with what is happening in the painting, while the other half of the curtain is raised, revealing additional depth in the image. This breakthrough acts as a mise en abîme of the opening onto the scene that the painting already represents. The only clue to the place we enter, it reminds us of its intimate nature and suggests a more private part to which we are indirectly indicated. We do not have access. The identity of odalisques given to the models by the title of the work refers to representations of fantasized visions of harem women popular in 19th century painting. They represented an exotic version of the woman offering her nudity to the viewer, and thus more tolerated by morality. Yet the artist does not choose, as in Ingres' The Great Odalisque, to position us in this erotic proximity to the model, nor does she keep us in a detached viewpoint, as in the Turkish bath. Marval places us at the border of 2 moments corresponding to the 2 halves of the image, an exchange between women and our arrival disturbing their peace. This in-between introduces a confrontation between the model and its viewer, and recalls a painting appreciated by Marval, Edouard Manet's Olympia. In the latter, the cat plays the role of the second gaze, confirming that of the model, herself a prostitute, thus designating us as a client. The Odalisques also favors confrontation with the viewer, as in Manet over the fantasized ambition of an Ingres. And yet, unlike Manet, the register here is not just that of subverting a bourgeois tendency towards voyeurism. Another particularity of the painting is the resemblance between all the models who commonly bear the facial features of the artist. In addition to thus completing her approach of reappropriating female imagery monopolized by men, the artist turns our gaze back on us and literally introduces her own gaze into the painting. From the Odalisques onwards, it is now the gaze of the artist Jacqueline Marval that will predominate over the traditionally masculine one. Among all the female figures that will inhabit her paintings, another predominant subject will be to depict her contemporaries. In relation to this, the Odalisques also directly evoke the image of prostitution, which was highly prevalent in the Paris of that era. The friend of Marval the painter, Lucien Mancieux, recounts,
"One day, she gifted me one of the very first studies for her Odalisques that I had greatly admired in her studio. 'This is my best canvas,' Marval declared proudly, adding, 'but I walk all over it,' referring to her Odalisques, from which apparently Matisse openly drew inspiration."
Beyond being a pivotal work in her career, what legacy did the work that Apollinaire deemed deserves to stay have during Marval's lifetime? The hypothesis reveals itself. Through its size, framing, hues, the presence of drapes in the background of the composition, certain details, the way several of the models are positioned, and their placement in the scene, as well as the subject of the work itself. Les Odalisques particularly recall another painting, Pablo Picasso's depiction of a brothel scene, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. Completed in 1907, 4 years after Marval's painting, this cubist masterpiece appears to stem from the same matrix, but with a different treatment. The two works even met, both selected for the exhibition L'Art Moderne en France, organized by the poet and critic André Salmon, a friend and admirer of both artists. At the time of creating Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, Picasso had already exhibited several times with Marval, notably near Montmartre, at Bertheville, a gallery where both artists started. They frequented the same neighborhoods, places, and personalities of the art world, from Montmartre, where Picasso lived and worked, to Montparnasse, where Marval kept Les Odalisques, which she would hold on to for her entire life. Did Picasso see Marval's painting before painting Les Demoiselles d'Avignon? How can an artist's inspiration, when not revealed by them, be verified? What remains of the forgotten artists? Beyond formal resemblances, the most exclusive particularity of both works is surely the power with which they look at us. With Picasso, this gaze reflects our experience of painting itself, its forms and colors, as the subject of the work. At Marval's, the characters, bearing traits of their creator, reclaim the power of an image by responding to our gaze with their own. After Les Odalisques, Marval's career will gain momentum, leading to significant collaborations such as her participation in the decoration of the innovative Théâtre des Champs-Élysées, and increasingly intense participation in numerous French and international exhibitions around the world. Her subjects and their treatment will become more and more personal as seen during her experiences of the war, or like her series of Biarritz, attracted for its light and the new habits that the society of the 1920s invented on the coastline. Until her death in 1932, she will always be fully embracing the experimentation of new ways of painting in which her colleagues and friends, who would be called the Fauves, led by Matisse, have embarked. Through these series and others, Marval perpetually reinterpreted an image of women, articulating her own and those of others, public personalities, intimates of the artist, anonymous and literary figures in response to a shared emergency, that of seeing them with her own eyes.